Oh, you're talking about the guy that looks like Jesus walking down the street, or a shepherd?
Am I the only one that's never seen this guy?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Is he really?
Yeah, I didn't know if like he was going to some program or something.
That's what I
Just dresses like that all the time.
No, I see him at least once a week, I think.
Oh, really?
Makes me smile.
Yeah. Is he just out for a stroll or?
We had hiking.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, probably really need to get started.
Well, now Matt's.
Now Matt's here.
Get those numbers figured out. Yeah. We'll see. This is just an informal work session.
Yeah, right. So, informal work session. That's where we are going to start right now, and talking about wastewater. And I apologize, I'm not sure who's God's. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Before we get into the actual presentation, I'd like to do a brief sequence of events that has to bring us tonight to the work session. In 2017, the Wastewater Master Plan included a cost analysis comparison to send new wastewater flow to the existing Kill Creek wastewater treatment plant and a new South wastewater treatment plant. August of 2019, with the development of GRADA, we started looking at when or what do we need to do to put a wastewater treatment plant on the southeast. So one of the requirements was to present a anti-degradation study to KDHE. The study was completed, submitted to KDHE on March of 2020, and the results of the anti-deg study was presented to City Council on April 26, 2020. Basically, the study said that the South wastewater treatment plant will be the best option at that moment. So the city awarded a preliminary design for the South wastewater treatment plant to GBA. Then on August 14th, 2020, we received a letter from KDHE saying that the new facility can only discharge 750,000 gallons. And they also wanted two additional alternatives. One was to send the discharge to the Wolf Creek, and the second was to send the discharge to Seedwater Creek, which is about 5 miles from the site. Then on May 15th, 2021, the city requested GBA to perform a short-term growth and collection system modeling. So basically, we wanted to know what is the present situation, what immediate improvements are needed now, and what's the future. So with that, I would like to pass the presentation to GBA. We have Tim Schneller and Colin Stalter. They'll be doing the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Gons. As Gons said, I'm Colin Stalter of GBA, and I'm accompanied here by Tim Schneller and also Landon Bell, and we're part of the project team that worked on the study looking at the collection system alternatives. So is the presentation going to come up? Oh, thank you, appreciate it. There we go, awesome. Okay, so the collection system study was evaluating these two alternatives that Gons briefly discussed about sending water either to the existing Kill Creek plant or constructing a new wastewater treatment plant in the bottom of this watershed, the bottom of what we're calling the southeast planning area. And so our goal was to evaluate different strategies or alternatives for not only what type of collection system improvements, but also the different treatment plant improvements would be needed in the short term and long term for these two options. In our presentation, we're going to be going over not only our approach, but also the recommendations and the byproducts from this report, as well as an implementation plan and a capital improvement plan for the next 5 and then 10 years moving forward based on our recommendations on the option to pursue. So to go over the study, outlined here in yellow is the what we're calling that southeast planning area. To date, the city does not have much sanitary infrastructure located southeast of I-35 other than the South Lift Station and the area Gons mentioned previously, the Prairie Trace development, which is temporarily being pumped to existing infrastructure and up to the Kill Creek plant. The challenge with this watershed is that it drains the opposite compared to the rest of the city. The city is actually located across 4 different watersheds, so it makes a collection system pretty challenging to plan for the future. And so this watershed, it's logical to locate a new wastewater treatment plant at the bottom of it to collect that wastewater flow. However, the biggest challenge and hurdle is bypassing Hillsdale Reservoir, which is just south of here. As Gons mentioned before, there's strict nutrient limits with this effluent point, and so 2 different alternatives, or actually 3 different alternatives were investigated for sending flow elsewhere, treated flow from this wastewater treatment plant around Hillsdale Reservoir. In the study, we identified several different areas of potential growth, and that's kind of outlined on this figure here. In red, we have areas within the city that have already been developed or are already partially developed, and then areas in yellow and blue are short-term and long-term growth prospects. And so for our study, we took this into account when modeling different projections and flow rates within the collection system and how to accommodate this flow. As I mentioned before, the other option, alternatively to the South Wastewater Treatment Plant, would be constructing a lift station at the bottom of this watershed and then pumping it all the way up to Kill Creek. It's a lot of collection system going down one direction and then end up pumping it all the way up to the Kill Creek option. So that's why these 2 options were thoroughly vetted during the study. As part of the study, we evaluated the 3 different growth rates for population projections, and this included low growth projections, baseline projections, as well as high growth projections. On here, you'll see also 3 different shades of boxes for development milestones. So this would be 25% build out, 50% build out, and 75% build out, depending on those speed of growth rates. Based on some conversations with city staff, it could be more likely that the ultimate growth of Gardner could be more in line with our 50% projections. And so for this reason and for the study, we focus primarily on the baseline and high growth projection rates, as well as 50% build out for the improvements that we'll be presenting in this report. Based on these population projections, we are then able to equate that to a flow rate for the wastewater loading in order to estimate the capacity of the infrastructure needed. Going back real quickly on this one, the other thing I do want to note is there is a challenge with sizing the infrastructure, which is why we evaluated 2 different growth rates. You don't want to oversize the infrastructure and then not have growth delivered based on economic impacts and other things that might slow the growth rate down. And so you could be investing all that money into infrastructure that's not being used to its peak capacity. Versus if you undersize this infrastructure, then if the growth happens more quickly, then you need to invest in future phases more quickly. Going back to this graph, sorry to jump back and forth, but on this one, the blue is our wastewater projected flow rates. On the left is flow in million gallons per day. And you can see on the dashed black at the bottom, it's the existing rated capacity, average day capacity of the Kill Creek plant. So we're closely approaching what that rated capacity is at. And you can see in 2025 is when it's reaching that capacity based on the baseline projections. You can see in the past that there's been brief peaks, and that would be due to rain events. I know the city is investing money in combating infiltration and inflow, INI, to reduce that loading, but the rain events are going to impact the loading scene in the collection system. So taking these population projections, design flow rates, we were able then to do model simulations using 2 different hydraulic modeling softwares to determine what the lift station and also the collection system capacities are and the improvements needed if we're going to route all the flow from this planning area and other areas within the city up to the Kill Creek plant. We not only used one modeling software to evaluate the collection system, but also the lift stations. Then we also used the flow data collected by the city in 2018 to calibrate the hydraulic model, so we have some confidence in the results being produced from this hydraulic model. I'm going to pass it over to Tim Schneller now to discuss a little bit about these recommendations and the sewer capacity modeling.
Thank you. So when we modeled the system, the first thing we did was looked at existing conditions, not considering any future growth, but how's the system functioning as it is. And you'll notice on there that there's a couple areas where there's some red shading of the pipes, indicating that pipes are overloaded in those areas. I'm going to quickly, let's see, there we go. I'm going to break that up into 2 areas. One thing to note about these 2 areas is on the right-hand side is a little label that says East Lift Station. That actually, the flow from that lift station splits and goes to both of these areas. So that's kind of a part of what we're looking at. So these 2 areas, the one on the right or on the left is just south of Colleen Drive, north of Madison Avenue. There's some really flat sewers there, and that's been a problem for the city for a while. In that area, the sewer becomes quite overloaded during a 50-year storm event. On the right is another area with 2 smaller areas that are also overloaded. The interesting thing about this is that the city is currently experiencing development right in this area, and there's a possibility of putting in a relief sewer that could go in with the growth to try and alleviate this issue. But on the left, we have an alternative plan for that. And it's to run a relief sewer through Wynwood Park. It would run from east of Colleen Drive through Wynwood Park, past 167th Street, and then up to an existing interceptor that feeds up to the north lift station, which is on the north side of town off of Gardner Road. One of the benefits of this sewer is that it would actually remove an existing pump station at the same time, which would help with dealing with the operation and maintenance costs that the city typically deals with lift stations. That lift station actually flows into an 8-inch sewer, which we have marked as undersized, and so it would take some pressure off of that sewer. So this is one of the short-term projects that we recommend be completed as soon as possible. So again, Colin mentioned that we're looking at 2 alternatives. One is to send flow to the Kill Creek treatment plant, and KCWRRF is Kill Creek Water Resource Recovery Facility, and so it basically was an acronym for treatment plant. on the right-hand side is the south wastewater treatment plant that is being considered. So you'll see in here that there's red lines and yellow lines, including some yellow dashed lines that indicate sewers that would be overloaded at 50% growth. So this would be somewhere around 65,000 people in the city of Gardner. And so these lines would be overloaded on the left-hand side if the flow is sent from the south area up through the existing collection system. On the right side is where flow would actually go down to the south wastewater treatment plant, or I'm sorry, on the right side. One of the options for that is to actually take flow from the east lift station and send it down to the treatment plant. So it would kind of help the treatment plant get started. It would have some flow coming to it. But it also takes the load off of the existing sewers within town. So that's why the options are being looked at. The yellow indicates later phases, whereas the red is something that needs to occur fairly soon. So here's the, again, the model. Based on this, we anticipate that different relief sewers will be built within the city over this period of time. In addition, you'll see kind of green lines on the lower right-hand side of each image, and that's the sewers to serve this growth area. Those would not necessarily be the city's responsibility, although the city could potentially share in the costs of that depending on how the city wants the development to occur. You'll also notice kind of halfway down those green sewers, we indicate proposed temporary lift station. And that is a way to delay some of the improvements by diverting some of the flow over into the Kill Creek area, and then later on take that out and build sewers down to the south treatment plant. As you can see, there's a lot of sewers that are affected by the flow coming to the Kill Creek treatment plant as it comes up through the city. On the right-hand side, not nearly as much. There we go. Okay, so to get to the 50% build out, there's improvements that need to occur with each option. You notice on the right-hand side that there's a fair amount of money invested in the treatment plant, as well as the pump station improvements, which includes adding pumps, adding storage, adding force main improvements, other things like that. And force main is basically a pressurized sewer that sends flow up over a hill to a gravity sewer. There's relief sewer improvements to take that flow and convey it down to the Kill Creek plant. And then there's also collection system improvements in kind of the southeast area that would also occur. At the same time, when you're looking at the south wastewater treatment plant option, there's a fair amount of cost associated with the treatment improvement. Again, keep in mind that includes not just a treatment plant, but also a pump station and a force main to pump that flow around the Hillsdale watershed. I'll show you that in a second. In addition, there's some improvements to the pump station, not nearly as much as the Kill Creek option. There's some relief sewer improvements and also the same sewers in the planning service area. So the green dot right in the middle is assuming where the treatment plant would be located, or actually it would be up closer to 199th Street. The three options are The red option is pumping through Spring Hill over to the 10 Mile Creek. And that would, of course, require some negotiations with Spring Hill to pump flow through their city. The green option was the alternative to go around Spring Hill so that you're not having to deal with Spring Hill at all. And then the yellow option is a third option that was mentioned by KDHE, pumping up to a lake in Olathe and discharging up there. It was brought to the table late in the discussion. That would again require negotiations with Olathe, trying to send flow to that lake. And they're already in the process of trying to invest in that lake. And that would definitely be a discussion point. We also looked at operation and maintenance costs. And basically the two options are about the same. Again, we're not doing as much pumping with the south wastewater treatment plant, except for the fact that we have to pump that flow to other locations for discharge. So in reality, the two are fairly close to the same. I'll let Colin take over from here.
We have a couple figures on here to show the cost comparison of the two options. And so this first one here is following high growth rates and the infrastructure improvements that are needed. And so the orange line here is accumulated costs for the south wastewater treatment plant option, with that first increase in 2025 being the initial investment in the treatment plant. And then an alternate, the blue line would be the improvements in the existing infrastructure, as well as the Kill Creek plant with the next phase, the second phase of the plant expansion. On this next graph, this is with baseline projections. And so you can see no matter what the growth rate is, that the Kill Creek plant, when it comes to capital improvement costs, is significantly cheaper than constructing a new treatment plant, the south wastewater treatment plant, just because of that F1 force main and the huge challenge of constructing that to those alternate discharge points around Hillsdale. We did want to highlight some additional considerations, risks, and benefits with these two options. With the Kill Creek option, it definitely is the less costly option, but it also focuses your staff in a single treatment plant. Whereas if you constructed a new treatment plant, you would have to have additional staff to operate that treatment plant. And so having just a single point for operators is a huge benefit. With the risk with the Kill Creek plant is just the amount of pumping of raw sewage around the city. And so that increases O&M concerns such as odor issues, as well as corrosion at the critical spots within the city, which is the lift stations. Those major lift stations are the weak points and where flooding is going to occur. And then with the south wastewater treatment plant, the benefits is cutting down on that pumping of raw sewage, as well as there's a little bit more flexibility long-term wise with possible greater treatment capacity and also treatment technology, since it would be a newer plant. But the risk would be the jurisdictional obstacles working with the city of Spring Hill, Olathe, wherever that effluent discharge point would be. Then also just siting the wastewater treatment plant, working with the public where that's going to be located, acquiring the land, and then also the financial impact, since it is the more costly improvement of the two options. And then there is also some flexibility with investing with the Kill Creek option in the short term. We have had preliminary discussions with KDHE on the feasibility of having a regional wastewater treatment plant. The only problem with that is the timing. That takes time working with other shareholders to, such as Spring Hill, Olathe, to construct that facility, but there is state revolving fund loan forgiveness for regional facilities. It's just not in the cards right now with the timeline that Gardner's at to facilitate growth. It would be more of a long-term solution, but investing with the Kill Creek option gives us the flexibility of considering that in the future, because it would be constructing a temporary lift station in the watershed that then could be converted possibly to a influent pump station to a treatment plant. Lastly, so based on what we presented today, our recommendation is to go with the Kill Creek plant expansion and improvements in the collection system. So in the next 5 years, that includes the relief sewer that Tim discussed at Colleen Drive, as well as starting the design phase of a plant expansion of Kill Creek, and then some lift station improvements at the east lift station. And then the 5 years after that would be the actual construction costs of the next phase of the Kill Creek plant expansion, and then other relief sewer projects. So here you have the dollar figures and the various time ranges for those capital improvement projects. So lastly, I wanted to put this up here. This is a comparison. This is both accumulated cost curves for Kill Creek, but to give some comparison what baseline growth looks like versus high growth rates, depending on what the city sees in the coming future. So would like to hear from city staff and council about any questions. I know we've covered a lot and you guys have a long evening, so happy to shed light on anything that we've reviewed in our study.
Well, thank you, Tim and Colin. Appreciate the report. Actually, I don't appreciate it, but I understand. So thank you for being thorough with this. Questions from council?
My normal question is, what are the variables in the cost as we move forward into it? In other words, how have you guys built in inflation factor into the cost?
Yeah, we adjusted the cost throughout the study because of that reason, because material prices have been just increasing at astronomical rates right now. And then we also do have other contingency factors in those design costs and construction costs as well to account for other factors.
So it's basically 25% onto the cost of the project for contingency. We didn't escalate the projects into the future, assuming inflation. We were just looking at what the costs were in today's dollars. But the
Right.
plan is that as you go forward, you have to evaluate that as they come on.
Okay.
Troy?
Yeah.
I'll go back to you because
I got a lot too.
Okay.
So,
okay. Well, Mark, we'll go back to you.
So I understand the regional plant timeline issue and the other jurisdictional type issues. Did we investigate with Spring Hill, instead of pumping through their city, a combined plant on the west side of that existing little plant they have at the golf course, since they've got all that new growth to the north? Have we entertained with them the idea of a joint plant right there on the west side of town? Then we don't have to pump it through town, it's only halfway there, and that would support all their growth to the north and further to the south.
That is not something that we investigated during the study phase. I mean, I think that's a good point. If it cuts down the effluent force main by like 50%, let's say, on that side of town, I guess the question might be, it might be more to KDHE, is that stream, if it's would impact it enough having 2 treatment plants going to it, if it's too small to accommodate those, because there are limits on those discharge points. And that's something that we looked at when we were evaluating those discharge points, is where would it have to be to accommodate full build out of the planning area and what that flow rate would be. But I mean, that's a great point.
Anything to add to that?
No.
I was just gonna do a follow-up question just to make sure I understood. With that plant, would that still go into the Hillsdale area, or would that get you outside of the Hillsdale area?
Yeah, I guess that's what we would have to evaluate. I don't know that off the top of my head, looking at a map. Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise you're gonna have the same problem with KDHE. If it's going into the Hillsdale watershed, you're gonna have the same limitations, same issues that you have with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm
So
just-
Mark, we had that discussion probably a year ago with their mayor and their city administrator, and the amounts they were talking about were not even close to what our needs were. So, I mean, they were willing to entertain us doing something on their area, but we're talking about 250,000 gallons. It's nothing near the.
We're looking at
Mhm.
Big Bull
Yeah.
Creek type of numbers, and to be honest, I think it's, unless you get it to 10 Mile Creek, you're not gonna get get away from the Hillsdale watershed, because that's the only creek in that area that's not in Hillsdale. That actually goes in south of Bull Creek. So, my concern here is that, and you probably have these numbers, but you know, Jim, you and I had worked on this for a couple of years, so we knew what was going on the KDH&E side. Is there? We're talking about this regional solution. I get that, but is that the main driver of cost at this point for this? Is having to pump all that effluent
Yes.
around
Yes,
Hillsdale
it
Lake?
is.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah.
So if we, again, I know we can't, it's a hypothetical right now, but if that was removed, what would the cost factors be? Would it be closer than?
I think
Yeah, it's pretty comparable if you remove that from there. And
Yeah.
I mean, when we were first starting this study year ago, whenever it was, Hillsdale was still on the table with a smaller plant, but during the progression of our study, they
Mhm.
came back to us and said that's no longer a viable option,
course.
that no flow can go to Hillsdale anymore.
No flow, okay.
Yes.
Because we know that a jurisdiction to our west is currently contemplating an expansion of that plant,
Yes.
which is going down to Hillsdale, and they've already included that within their calculations, so
Right.
that's why we can't put any more effluent. Okay, so my question here is this. KDHE is adding how many millions of dollars to the cost of this project? Significant amounts of money.
Yeah.
You know,
What
is,
it, 35 million?
Yeah, about 35 million just to pump
Yeah.
it.
I understand that. Can we look at the possibility, I'm trying to think outside the box here, would the state be willing to do some work would be able to work with us from the cost perspective to get some of those costs of additional pumping around that watershed? Because here's the deal. Hill Creek has a capacity. At some point, we're going to hit that capacity. All right, we do have some expansion ability at the baseline plant, but you know, if we expect the city's population to double or more in the southeast quadrant, I think that the costs are going to outweigh the benefits at some point, sooner than we think. And that is the reason why I'm thinking, okay, well, if the state is imposing these costs, then the state should work with us to maybe help to alleviate those costs. I mean, has that been?
So
coming up in
we've
those
had that discussion with KDHE, and they explored, they were gonna do something with the loan agency, if I recall, and came back and said they'd work with us on the costs associated with Kill Creek and the additional treatment,
But not with South.
but not with South.
Even if we did what they wanted us to do and pump that sucker right around Hillsdale Lake.
No.
So they are really just trying to quash the South treatment plant, period.
Well, yeah, the focus from KDHE through the EPA is to limit the effluent going to Hillsdale.
But we're not going to Hillsdale. If we pump around Hillsdale, we're not going to Hillsdale. So
Right.
why would they have a problem with that?
We've had that discussion with their staff, with Tom Stiles, and that was several months ago, we had that discussion with them.
The comment that they've made is that they would like to get together a group of people that are invested in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Edgerton, Gardner, Olathe,
Spring Hill.
Spring Hill, and then bring in some of the people that use water out of the lake, and as well as the lake
Cooperative.
cooperative, yeah.
Yeah, because Hillsdale is a regional water supply. to
Absolutely, it is.
many-
It's our source. It's our
Right.
primary source
Yep.
of water.
Cities.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we understand how to. We
they-
need to preserve it. And again, I took Hillsdale completely out of the equation here because I'm saying, okay, let's go with one of the options that they've given to us around pumping that effluent around Hillsdale Lake.
Yeah.
That's the assumption.
Mhm.
Yeah.
okay?
But they see the Kill Creek expansion as the viable option.
Yeah.
Is that's?
Yep.
Yeah, they still wanna, they're using the thought of, well, we could get all the groups together to discuss the alternatives.
That could be 30
But-
years.
Yeah.
That
Who
could be
knows?
30
Yeah.
years. I mean,
Yeah.
understanding the self-interest of these communities.
Right.
Yeah. I
Exactly.
forgot to mention Johnson County Wastewater, which also pumps through this area from the New Century Air Center.
Yep, and we actually talked for a very brief moment about doing something with Johnson County Wastewater, and that didn't get anywhere.
Yeah.
So, the long and short of it is that KDH&E is trying to, like I say, force us into a single solution, and
Well, they
I'm
do
not
have
liking
a
that.
goal from the EPA of reducing the nitrogen and phosphorus in Hillsdale by 30%. So adding
Oh, no.
effluent. I mean, I did research on this when we looked at it several months ago, and they've got the studies and the reports behind them.
Oh, I get that.
Their task is to reduce the effluent, not add to it.
And I'm completely in agreement with that. I keep coming back to the fact, okay, let's take their approach, which is to pump it around Hillsdale, okay? Why can't KDH&E work with us on the cost? And the reason why is because they don't want us to put a south treatment plant. It's pretty clear. Because
Well, they're also setting precedent if they do that.
that, I get it, but we're doing what they're asking us to do, which is pump it around Hillsdale.
Well, actually, they're asking us to expand Kill Creek.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
They don't want to entertain any other option, is really what it comes down to. So,
I'm gonna go ahead just real quick and add to this because I think there's a real growth component to this
I
that we
know.
have to watch out for. And, you know, if we look at the growth numbers that are occurring right now, and this will be short-term growth when I'm talking about this, you know, we've got 3,000 roughly dwelling units that are in the pipeline, planning approval wise and
Yep.
moving through. Those will be the ones in the next 5 years that'll come online, 5 to 10 years. 78% of those are northwest of I-35. They're
Correct.
not in this growth area.
Yep.
So just understand, they have the upper hand right now as far as things going into the ground. So when we look at this, that southeast area is really a growth-driven scenario. It is not a scenario where we have to meet immediate needs necessarily. So
No.
I think the other part of what we need to look at is how much does development pay into the cost of whatever solution we go with here. We do have system development fees, but you can base those on that capital improvements program that's associated with this so that you get a fair share in that situation. So I also think we need to consider that we have growth agreements with DeSoto and Olathe to the north and west in the Kill Creek watershed. The potential for growth up in there if the plant is placed correctly or if the piping is placed correctly opens up both to the west for us and to the north for us, which is a significantly larger growth area than what's to the southeast. So that's the other balance point to start thinking about here. Is
Yep.
It's not just about serving the southeast, but it's the overall growth that we're
well,
looking at.
I still think that an expansion of Kill Creek is going to be required regardless. That's a, but I'm looking at the stress on the existing system.
I'll go you a step further. I would tell you it's almost to the point where we should look at a site at 127th Street where Kill Creek converges, where the different branches converge, and do that. Now, that's me as a planner looking many, many years down the road. That's not me as looking at the short-term scenario. But you're right, if you do something at Kill Creek, or you do something even with DeSoto, and you look at that, you start opening up a lot of ground area for us at that area.
One might argue that that's where the original wastewater treatment plant should have gone in the first place, but that's neither here nor there. Yep.
What's our ultimate capacity of Kill Creek with the expansion and those things?
So I believe it was set up for 2 additional expansions. However, didn't we look at potential layouts where you could have a 4th phase?
Yeah.
Because GBA was actually the original designer on that Kill Creek plant, and so right now this first phase is 2.5 MGD. So if you add on additional treatment trains, by a minimum it would be 7.5 MGD. But if we're able to fit a 4th, then you're talking about
10 inch.
10 MGD.
would that serve?
Yeah, it would
both
serve
the
everybody.
growth-
It was,
that would
it
Yeah.
was served
north-
based on,
North growth,
yeah.
southeast and all that.
based on current growth projections, yes, for about 15 to 20 years. Probably more than that.
It depends on how you extrapolate that. There's concerns, I think, this is why we're running a model, I think, where we're looking at baseline to high growth, is because in the short term, we could experience a spike here in the next few years with the apartments that are coming online and things like that. Depending on how those perform, you know, the apartment side of this or the higher density side of this may actually hold for a while, which will put us back more at that 100 to 150 units a year, you know, that we would see in single family homes. But then again, that's a hard one to gauge, you know, because at least 50% of what's coming online here is in apartment, and it's in 3 apartment units. If you consider the Treadway, the University Park that's been proposed, it's gone through Planning Commission if that gets its approval, and what's the third one? Oh, Tallgrass. So those are the 3 that are eminent in the sense of that level of development. I do think the market's gonna take a breather to see how well those 3 perform since they're getting constructed. If they meet their rental, if their rental capacity meets or exceeds what they're projecting, you might see a few more of those projects come online at that size. So it's gonna depend. The next 5 years could be a significant spike, but then it could level back to normal for a little bit, and we'll see what happens from there.
How's our single family? I know we have Hilltop out there, we have the expansion, the last phases of
Yeah,
Symphony
we've still got
Farms.
Symphony Farms, we've got
Yep.
Hilltop out there. Breckenwood is getting ready to engage out there in the northwest area. Of course, Grotto's going on the southeast side. We've got Cypress Creek, which is the Bergdorf property with Rosh Coleman that's on 167th Street. So there's a lot coming online on that northwest part of town.
Yep, and then on the south side, we also have Suskin Farms, which will be, you know, building out.
Yeah.
They're only about a third of the way through their housing inventory right now, with a couple more phases in planning.
Yep.
correct? Yeah,
That's correct.
so,
Keep in mind that ultimate growth is over 100,000 people, and look at 60 to 80 years out. So at the 50% model, I believe we're at 60, 65.
Yep.
So that's
That seems
a
like
big
a-
jump in population.
I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, if
Oh,
we
yeah.
had oodles of money, we were the federal government.
oh, no, it is
Then,
no
then we
It's-
could look at
It's absolutely no
the
brainer.
southwest, or southeast. But Kill Creek meets the needs
Certainly.
immediately. We can look over the next 10 years for a regional plan. If you're looking at 127th Street and Moonlight, that's basically where the wastewater treatment plant is for Joco right now. So there's options there, or something else, wherever else that they want to go. But $50 million.
Oh, no, I get it.
I mean, it's pretty simple.
Mark, I'm saying that it's pretty clear that the rules of the game are such that we're not doing anything but Kill Creek.
Yep.
I mean, that's just the way it is.
So,
Doesn't mean I have to like it.
some of those projections had, you know, our capacity that we're nearing capacity, and in the next couple of years could be above it. So, you know, how quickly we
Again,
can
it's
start
kind
these
of
projects.
related to growth, but if growth is towards the baseline, then you can probably do design in the next 5 years and then do the construction of a plant shortly thereafter.
Todd, that's what this is.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mhm.
okay, sorry.
And this is is this already in our CIP? I mean, we already have the money kind of set aside, and that's part of the reason why we did the rate study on wastewater was because we anticipated this, so.
A lot of these costs weren't included in that rate.
Oh, they weren't.
Or at least not to this extent.
So we'll have to do another reevaluation then?
I'll get
Level
to it in my
set.
presentation to the council.
Yep.
And
So more good news. All right, excellent, lovely.
And some of those improvements are the new infrastructure. So as Tim mentioned before, like part of that could be put on a developer potentially if it's development driven rather than in there, but we've included it in the schedule so it's not a surprise. So
Well, and if we make I-35 somewhat of the delineation between if we're gonna do then it's much more clear, right? Kill Creek is upgrading and supports all that new growth, and then to the south, we could look at what that takes.
I think Matt can confirm there's a couple of different options, right? There's those ideas of creating a special sewer benefit district for an area that's broadly defined geographically. I think you can also look at what are the development fees that we're charging for sewer system development fees, again, based on the capital improvement program to see what that is, because those kinds of things all affect the rates also, right? Because it's a revenue stream at that point in time. So how do we diversify that revenue stream to spread that cost out versus putting it all on the users through the rate or putting it all on developers? Of course, we're always walking that fine line. You don't want to upset the users, right, the ratepayers, and you don't want to upset the developers and stagnate your growth. So you've got to find that happy medium with those things.
Great. Any more staff? Any questions? Okay. Well, Tim and Colin, thank you for your
Yep.
presentation.
Thank you to
Yes, thank
everyone
you guys.
here.
Appreciate it. Although I don't like particularly the results, I
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
appreciate the work that was put
Understandably.
into this. Thank you.
Yep.
I think we're ahead of fund it. All right, so we've got
25 minutes.
25 minutes.